Welcome back to Zay's retrospective on Super Mario Galaxy. We've already talked about the atmosphere of Super Mario Galaxy, and today I want to talk about the hub world, the Comet Observatory. Mario's come a long way in terms of hub worlds. In the first game, there wasn't even a map showing you where you were, there was just you went from one level to the next. By the time the third game came out, we had a nice map that showed us exactly where we were and exactly where we were going. Super Mario 64 was the first true hub world that any Mario game had. Princess Peach's castle was a fun place to just romp and roll around and play at. You could go outside and jump on the trees. You could just practice your platform, and it was a great time. Though I've never played Sunshine all the way through, I've played part of it, and I know that Delfino Plaza has a similar type of feel to it. Only Delfino Plaza feels a little bit more like one of the kingdoms from Super Mario Odyssey. Both of these hub worlds are great, and though they do things very differently, ultimately they're a place for the player to relax, and they're a place for the player to select a mission. The Comet Observatory is no different, yet at the same time, it's very different. I think one of the best ways to describe how different it is and illustrate that fact is by looking at the game's sequel, Super Mario Galaxy 2. The Starship Mario has a simple way to get from one level to the next. You go up to the steering wheel of the ship, and you select the level. Everything is in front of you, all the time. That's not how Super Mario Galaxy works. The Comet Observatory is a hub unlike the others. There's more thought to be had when selecting a level. This is mainly due to the domes. Each of these domes containing 4 galaxies as well as a boss battle, with the exception of one dome, which I think is very interesting. We'll come back and talk about that later. I don't want to talk about it too much right now, because I don't want to spoil the idea I have for a later video. But the Comet Observatory, it was made to be 2 things. Of course, as in the name, it's an observatory. It's used to look for things. What it was intended to look for, I'm not going to get into right now, but just know that it is an observatory, but it's also a home. The home for the builder. Again, I don't want to get too much into the storybook at this point in time, but I will say that the ones who built this were Rosalina and the first Luma she ever came in contact with. Again, I don't want to get into spoilers, so I won't say anything more about that right now, but I want to think for a moment that every single part of the Comet Observatory isn't just a hub world like you would see from Mario 64. Half of the reason that the rooms exist in there is just to give you another level. I don't really think Princess Peach needs an entire room for a picture full of Bob-ombs, or a picture with Goombas on it. This is just a plot device to get you from one level to the next. Rosalina's Observatory isn't the same way. Everything about this place was crafted to be a home. Sure, ultimately, the purpose of these domes is to take you to levels. But take a step back. Look at these domes for a moment. They each feel lived in, used. They all have a purpose outside of going to levels. When you look at the terrace, the first of the domes, you don't really see all that much. You see a room that's very highly decorated, and you see a telescope. Of course, being an observatory, this room is mandatory. Where else are you going to watch the stars than the terrace? It's the perfect place to take a step back and chart the skies. Again, later on we'll learn that Rosalina is someone who goes throughout the galaxy with her life, and that's part of her goal, that's part of her purpose. The terrace is a very important room for this goal. There's something very interesting about this telescope that I would like to say, but I'm going to save that for when I talk more about Rosalina later on. The second of these domes is the fountain. The fountain as a source of water, a source of running water that leaves the Comet Observatory. is useful for many things. It reminds me a lot of a bathhouse, and I'm sure it's used as such, especially with so many children. If I haven't stated directly yet, Rosalina is oftentimes referred to as Mama by the Star Children, the Lumas. So having a fountain is, let's just say having a place to bathe your children is very important. If you're a parent, you know. The third dome, the kitchen, I mean that's a mandatory place to have for any home. Though we never see anyone during the game actively cooking in the kitchen, it's kind of obvious that that's what happens. There's a stove/oven inside of it, as well as some cooking ingredients, as well as this beautifully shaped star mat in the middle of the room. I love this. The kitchen is a kitchen. I can't call it my favorite dome, but it's definitely one of the domes that sticks out as being the most homey. Though we never see anyone actively cooking during game time, we do see a picture of it being used to cook during a time that, well, don't want to give too much spoilers for that yet. Another thing I want to mention about these domes before I go any further is the level of trust that Mario has to get into these domes. Sure, you unlock these domes by obtaining grand stars and unlocking the next dome in sequential order, but think about it for a second. When you first get to Rosalina's observatory, you have access to the terrace. The terrace is where the business of the observatory takes place, looking at the stars. Second, you get the fountain, which is kind of equivalent to that which we would call a bathroom. We're no longer talking about business, we're talking about company. Someone who has access to the restroom, if they're in your house, you would call them probably a guest. Someone who has access to your kitchen, now that right there is more of a true guest, no longer just an obligatory type of a thing. We're talking about someone who's welcomed into the house now. That brings us to the next dome, the bedroom. The bedroom inside of the Comet Observatory is extremely fancy. Who else in the world has a set of matching purple wallpaper, carpet, and drapes over the bed? A lot of people will try to make the claim that purple being the color of royalty shows that Rosalina is somewhat related to royalty because of all the purple in her bedroom, but I don't really think that's the point that's being made here. The point that's being made here is that this is a place of comfort and luxury. Rosalina's life is not an easy one, as we'll learn later on, and having a place where she can just relax without having a care in the world, well, that's kind of important for her. Mario obtaining entrance into the bedroom is, I don't want to turn this into anything sexual, and I don't want anyone thinking that. I live near to my older brother's house. He and his wife have been married for a couple years now, and I'm at their house all the time. The one place in their house that I do not go, that I have not been invited to go, is their bedroom. Sure, I went in there once during the house tour when they were showing it off, but other than that, I don't have access to there. That's a very personal spot. Mario, having proved himself to Rosalina, now has access to the bedroom because she trusts him. Let's be honest, if someone has saved several dozen of your children, I mean, you're going to be very, very trusting of them, very thankful. You're going to allow them access that you probably wouldn't give most other people, especially if that meant helping you save more of my children. The next room in the observatory is the engine room. How many people do you let near your breaker box? Not many. Think of the level of trust that it requires to have someone be touching the electricity to your house. Not only is it nerve-wracking, it's also dangerous. If you touch the wrong thing on the breaker box, you could get... let's just say that your games could be over. Not only is Mario obtaining access to the engine room, not only is that a show of trust from Rosalina's part, but it's also a show of competence from Mario's part. He's knowledgeable enough and smart enough not to get himself hurt when he enters the engine room. The Guillermo in the engine room is also interesting. I've never put very much thought into that, but it's interesting that one resides in the observatory. I'll have to think more on that at some other point in time. Either way, the engine room is one of the most pivotal rooms on the observatory. Once unlocked, Rosalina tells you that it's now possible for the observatory to fly again. All you need is enough stars in order to get to the center of the universe, then you can fight Bowser. Much like the terrace, the engine room is a professional setting. It's not just a place of the home, it's a place for the work. It's a place for the job. This is actually the last dome where we have a boss battle, and I'll talk about the boss battles more later on, but the next room is this house. It looks very familiar. We saw this type of design back on the first level that we came across, the gate. This house, it's some sort of portal to that other house that we saw on the gate earlier. The gate is... it's not a dome, it's a level. And a unique one at that. There's no other galaxy in the game that only has 2 regular stars. Sure, Bowie Base has 2 stars, but one of them is a secret star. This one has 2 levels, no more. Both of these levels stand out from any other level in the game. The first one is, of course, the first level that we come across in our trek through the starry skies, where we rescue our first Grand Star, meet Rosalina, and obtain the power to spin. But the second level is... well, it's a few things. It's the first time that we encounter purple coins in the game. I think it's the first time we even encounter purple coins in the entire series. It's also the only level where we get any more sort of backstory onto Rosalina. I don't want to spoil it too much, but here's what I'll say. She says, while standing on the gate, she says, "This planet, it's very dear to me." More on that later. The final dome of the Comet Observatory is... it's different. Earlier I talked about the atmosphere that Super Mario Galaxy has. There's a very grandiose nature that this game can throw at you. Well, it does also have a quietness. This quiet music is reflected in the domes. It's just a couple notes that are put together to create these chords. All the domes have this music, except the last one. The garden, it's said to be a secret room. Why would a place like this be a secret, though? Why would a place like this not have any music? One of the main reasons I wanted to touch on the gate before I talked about the garden is because of the similarities that we see in the atmosphere between the two. The landscape is very similar to that of the gate. The flowers, the rocks, there's no trees and there's no houses, sure, but there's no roof either. It's a flat plain with cloudy sky. You don't ever see this anywhere else in Mario Galaxy. In fact, in the background, if you look close enough, you can see sprawling mountains. I have to wonder, why exactly does this place exist? More on that in my final retrospective of Rosalina herself. These are all the domes that are contained in Super Mario Galaxy, but they're not all the places that are contained inside of the Comet Observatory. I think of the garage, a place where you have the Starshroom commanded by Captain Toad and his little band of toads that help Mario every now and then as they go throughout the stars. I think of the beacon glowing inside the middle of the observatory, both giving power, light, and life to the Lumas. I think of the hub where Rosalina stands, giving her clear access to both a map of the observatory as well as an indicator of the power level of the observatory. And then there's the library. This isn't a dome, but it's a room unlike the domes. There's a lot to say about the library, which I will cover in my retrospective on Rosalina, but I will say this. The library gives us something that we don't get in any other mainline Mario game. A mainline character with a fully fledged story. The Comet Observatory is my favorite hub world that is in any Mario game. In fact, I can't really think of any other video games that exist that have a hub world that I enjoy as much. A lot of the speciality of Mario Galaxy that is held in my heart, a lot of it's nostalgia, but there's more to it than that. And again, I'll get into that in my final retrospective on Rosalina, but I just want to take a moment and look at the observatory. There's a couple pads, both in the front of the observatory and then in the back behind the bedroom. Whenever we stand on these pads, we're able to just zoom out for a bit and just enjoy looking at the observatory. You don't get this with any other Mario game. Like, I think of Odyssey. You can go inside of the Odyssey, you can look at it from all angles, and you can sneak in inside of the back pipe. That's it. There's nothing more to the Odyssey than that. You look at Super Mario Galaxy 2, it's a tiny little planet that's barely worth exploring. Now sure, it's fun to explore, don't get me wrong, and it's definitely worth it, but like, you look at all the hub worlds in Mario, and then you look at Galaxy's hub. There's something special about it. At the least, special to me. Super Mario Galaxy did an amazing job with this, both in the design and the storytelling of the Comet Observatory.